looks like we may be on the road. Let us activate our analog light bulb, clickety clacks, dials, typewriters, tip logo, etc., and so forth and so on. Welcome to Evolution Hour on the 8th of June 2026. Our ongoing year of certainty and doom. Sorry for being on a little bit late today. I've been busy constructing things. It's my task to make sure that all of the text that Jackson and I are doing for the new book can be fitted into the same space as the previous book, which was pushing out at the boundary layers of what could be published in terms of thickness. So I'm doing the triaging of compression, of where I'm pulling in paragraphs, deciding if there's any peripheral background sources that can be junked, things that are related to how creationists deal with things, and working out how many extra lines and stuff that needs to be done. And that's part of the fun task of making sure that we don't lose any of the primary source material and issues and that come up, plus all the fun little writing that both of us have been doing on the way we're phrasing all of that stuff. So anyway, that got me a little bit late as to figuring out what's going on. As you well know, we are examining the two Dwayne Gish books. Books, you know those, things made out of paper that they have in that Dwayne Gish is one of the venerable people in the creationist community, been dead for many years. And because we're now moving into an internet world, an awful lot of that book lore, and particularly the influence it's had on creationism, is fading into obscurity because so many modern anti-evolutionists will be riffing off of what they see on YouTube or what they see on various websites from the Discovery Institute, Answers in Genesis, and so forth and so on, where very little of the material from the book systems of Gish and company is available online. Much harder to find. So anyway, we're doing a source analysis, comparing the two versions. It's now reached the point where almost a third of the sources in the 95 book are new to the 95 book. Not so far technical literature. It's still playing authority quote games, as will be seen. But at least we're keeping up on all of that stuff. He has some quotes from some of the stuff that's spilling over from the 78 book. Wilfrid LaGrosse Clark, born in 1895, died in 1971. And again from Pierre Grasset, this time, curiously, from the 1977 English version of his not really anti-evolution book. He was a French kind of Lamarckian, as we have noticed previously. Both of them being authority quoted by Gish about how important the fossil record is for showing evolution. And that all sets the stage for Gish's plan, which is the whole point of his book, to undermine the fossil record of evolution via the fossil record. And Clark's quote was from a 1955 magazine article, which is completely invisible online. It was apparently only done for a few years. It was a Discovery magazine that the stuff from that far back is utterly invisible. And because it was just a general authority quote, I'm not exactly losing any sleep over not being able to get the material. However, from that very same year of 1955, he wrote a book on human evolution evidence. And that, thanks to archive.org, is in fact available. So we'll be putting a link to that up, and I'll be keeping an eye out as to whether Gish ever cites it. The Clark 1955 book. Very possible he won't. But that book gives insight as to what evidence was on the field, including the early material on the Australopithecines. It's also the case that Clark put down fraud. So we'll see also if it makes note of that. I haven't tried to figure out any of the little elements on that. Then there are several authority quotes from that Gish is drawing on for the idea that it's either creation or evolution, this kind of by that. Hello, Vesta. You're enjoying the weather. Yeah, well, it's a little bit cooler in Spokane, although, and we got some little thunderstorms and windstorms and stuff, but nothing really super duper serious. Supposed to be a little bit warmer we'll find out about all of that. I'm just happy, frankly, little cooler weather and little occasional sprinkly showers, and that's not to water the lawn, act my water bill down, so which has been icky for the last few weeks. Anyway, there was a 1983 anthology, Critical Criticism, by David Will, and a little teeny 58 on there. I was surprised to find out it was available at Archive. So I'm going to be putting the link. Default audio device unexpectedly stopped. I don't know. Are you? I'm getting a little warning on the sound system. Is everybody hearing me okay, Vesta? Give a little thumbs up if I'm running okay on sound. Admittedly, my voice is a little bit crumpy because the yo-yo weather gives me a little bit of a croup. I will assume, I'm hoping that the counter is continuing to move forward, so I'm hoping that's going okay. Anyway, the Wilson's book is a nice one, and it's got like a big section on the evolution and religion issues. There's a lot of historical material. It probably won't come as a staggering shock, its content to the average person, and it's not heavy-duty critical on technical material. It's a more general summary of the legal issues. Yeah, okay, good. Yes, I was worried because this little yellow bar came up and suddenly said it was having problems with the audio, and I didn't know whether that was a problem or not. You know, what the hell? Computers, they just are crazy. Anyway, the other quote that he was doing, Gish was doing for this very purpose, is from Douglas Fatuma's 1982 Science on Trial book, page 197. I have one of editions of it, and it is one of the, to my view, one of the most interesting and well-crafted criticisms of creationism that came out during that period. I think it beats out the Wilson book. It beats out Niles Eldritch, the Monkey Business, and various are on there. There's only a few anthologies that were hitting some of the ground. There was one from Zetterberg and another one from that period. Fatuma, being a biologist himself, he's written textbooks. He's got a nice level for both explanatory bits and also the data field. So it's quite a classic, and it's available at archive.org. So we are putting the link up to that little thing. Now, both him citing the Wilson book and the Fatuma book opens up what I call the Dracula rule in the old tip work, which is that if you go to all the trouble of citing a book, you are now open for everything in it. In the same way that when the vampire is invited into the house, boop, it can come in whenever you like. In fact, that element pops up in the Sinners movie, the very entertaining, vivid 1930s era Dracula vampire movie that was nominated for Best Picture and all of that, and it's well worth the watch. It's really neat, but it plays on exactly that same element that people, you do invite them in, they can come in pretty much any way they like. So we'll find out whether or not any issues that whether he ever directly addresses them. And I'm recalling that Fatuma didn't pop up a lot in his 1993 response to critics, although I suppose I should check to be on the next side. Well, I'll look on that in the next week. Anyway, we've also got our part 2 material about Jeffrey Tomkins and the latest May-June issue of Acts and Facts. I wish they don't immediately material available from the print journal, although eventually it will become available. So anybody who wants to look into the article will be able to locate it in due course. Anyway, this one was about standing genetic variation, which is the non-earth-shaking realization that some adaptations draw on existing DNA. Duh. I mean, What were you thinking they were going to do? Everything draws on existing DNA with the tweaks of natural mutations or new material that can come in through lateral gene transfers and things like that. Anyway, to this end, he cited a range of papers that only underscored how much of the information he was leaving out, and they are available online, so I'm going to be able to link them up to you. Several are kind of basic stuff involving flowers. There's a 2010 paper from Helens et al. And a 2023 paper from Walter et al. That he might have felt safe in alluding to peripherally as citations because they don't expressly fall into the issue of the YEC timeframe, but not so for the others. And therefore, we're going to be happy to look into those. One is Lai et al. 2019 on songbird evolution, and that is expressly being discussed about the songbirds since the last glaciation phase and how their distribution altered because of glaciers opening up habitats and all that kind of stuff. Then there's a paper from 2023 from Furman et al. On fish evolution, covering the last 10,000 years. And then there's one from Nakamura et al. 2023 on cichlid fish, relating to material over the last 10 years. So it would be necessary for Tomkins to figure out a way to shoehorn the biogeography, the genetics, the background context information into that fairy tale world of the either pre-flood or post-flood world, depending upon when he thinks that would be. Tomkins has not been, and people who are more familiar with this, if Joel Duff picks up on this, or Dapper Dino or whatever, but I can't recall Tomkins being overly fussy about the boundary layer of when the flood started and stopped, or really thinking much about what the physical world looked like during this period. He's trying to compress all the genetics in the same way Nathaniel Jensen was doing in his 2 books. But that paleogeography issue that is implicit if you're going to bring up this material on songbirds and fish distribution, he's not paying any attention to it all. And I don't anticipate them being able to do all of this. One of the things, shameless plug, that we'll be going into in considerable detail in the new book is the whole biogeography issue, reminding people how poorly creationists deal with the subject, but also how at every single stage, every bit of information needed to have occurred within a paleo context of Noah's lost worlds. There would have been the world that was created 6,000 years ago, if we're going by their Usher chronology. Then 15, 16, 1700 years later, the big slosh, the flood, of which everything that's not on the ark, except for the things they don't bother about, like insects and fish and all that kind of stuff, are weeded through with the cataclysm. And then the post-flood period, creating worlds where, depending on which creationist you read, you're going from Rodinia to Pangaea to the modern world, or just to Pangaea to the modern world based on some of these other cosmological materials. Tim Clary at ICR is kind of a standalone for thinking that they can go all the way into the Cenozoic and even down to the Pleistocene, maybe, as still flood times. But as to the continental distribution, every one of these bloody people are basically riffing off of the existing paleogeography work of the standard geologist, except they can't decide which ones they want to steal. A few of the ones, as we'll be discussing in the new book, are aware of the fact that trying to go from Rodinia to Pangaea to the modern world in that tight time frame is really stretching things. Although, when you think about it, to go from Pangaea to the present world in the creationist time frame is stretching things. All the heat, the limestone being formed, the mountain ranges being thrown up. I mean, it's just chaos. And that's why you never find, as in not ever, as in no counterexample I know of, a map in detail of the pre-flood world showing if there are plate boundaries, showing what mountain ranges there may or may not have been, elevations, ecological zones, river drainage patterns, all of that kind of stuff, which you get in real geology. And we are going to be inundating you, pun intended, with the real geology and how meticulous, explanatory all that, including stuff from my neck of the woods, thanks to the extraordinary Nick Zentner and his lectures that he's been doing for years and years and years for his college class down there at Central Washington University, where he's just drawn in geologists from all over the world, either directly visiting CWU or doing so by virtual interviews by Zoom and all that for his classes and for his various shows. Because the Pacific Northwest is geology central. It's not all that spectacular for the paleontology part. We have some interesting little paleontology beds, but we are not stars in the show for the Cambrian explosion, for the Devonian, for Silurian, you name the period, the Mesozoic, that we have just scattershots. But move to geology and plate movements and plume magma eruptions and glacial outburst floods and exotic terrains being embedded and morphed and shoved around because of plate movements over hundreds of millions of years. Come to the Pacific Northwest, kids. We have got it all. And you'll be getting a nice sampling of the geological and scientific literature on this subject, of which so much of it is directly available open access, so that there's no excuse whatsoever for regular citizens curious about this not to know about it, and therefore no excuse for creationists not to know about it. And you'll be seeing how they tiptoe in and around and past all of this stuff, and they're never getting very close to it. So it's a fun material, educational as all get out, I think. And then, of course, I'll be sidling on to my chart-heavy chapter on the Ark Encounter kinds, where we'll be cataloging the listing of everything on board the ship according to Answers in Genesis. And this will be a thing you can't find at their website. This will be the scoop because of how it's organized. You discover they're stealing evolutionary arguments left and right and playing off material that be, oh, good heavens, I got another idiotic, I'm getting a dumb things for a restart of my damn Windows up in 4 minutes. Hold a moment. Go over here and find another time for this to happen. Ick. But other will be shutting down in 4 minutes. Let's pick a bloody time. Okay, we can do that. And pick a time in, let's see, 1:44. Let's, I get the damn thing to get. Let's have, oh, yeah, we go. Let's do that. Put up there. Whoops. Yeah, this is a screwball. Well, it's got a weird little menu here that doesn't seem to want to adjust for time. Why can't it move to AM? Oh, there we go. No, that's, oh, I gotta go over there. We go. Okay. Yikes. Now, let's see. What do we got at 1:40? Let's go for about 2 a.m. already. There we go. Okay. Whoop. Alrighty. So sorry for that. It's a menu I don't get off to all that often. And so it will presumably be doing its stupid Windows update after I am off with my show. Sitting on these 7 supercontinents. Yeah. For those not familiar with the bits of things, although the farther back we go, the more uncertainty there is because there's less and less rocks to play with. But you've got the obvious one of Pangaea, which is the one that's breaking up during the early dinosaur period. And then you've got Rodinia that's taking place around the Ediacara. And then there's roughly about 600 million years between cycles. Whether located in one hemisphere or vertically from one zone to another, it's kind of device unexpectedly stopped sending me little. Let me see. Running, so I think we're still on the air. And little fragments of those things are showing. They're doing this in part by looking at paleomagnetism to be able to see what orders things are and real history about deep mantle tomography. The image you want to have in your mind on this really hard candies that look like little squiggles. They're about yay big and they're off colored and stuff like that. The Earth and little things starting to get our microphone default again. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. For heaven's sakes, maybe it's getting a conniption fit from my coughing. And that image is showing up in the deep tomography. The first one that really hit fan was deep underneath what present New York is. And when they do their modeling and things, they're realizing this is the back end of a plate subduction that took place hundreds of millions of years ago. So this stuff would eventually, earlier, have been up on the surface where North America is plowing into it. And so it's diving down, blah, 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 and crumpling up to form this weird little squiggly stuff. Now, it means that all this stuff is also kind of long-lived. It's a blob that doesn't break down too easily, which means they can detect these similar things on different plate boundaries in other places. They've already detected things underneath New Zealand, where there was big plate maneuvers and so on. And they're starting to do tomography like this in other areas. So they're able to work backward from these things to infer what was going on the surface, even of landscapes that have now completely disappeared from the surface unless tiny little fragments of them show up. So for anybody in the geology biz, like our friend of the channel, Colton, that we went down with the bunch down to the Grand Canyon back in 2021, this is like super duper times. This is for them as spectacular a technical breakthrough as the Webb telescope is for looking at distant galaxies. So happy, happy, joy, joy. And we can anticipate that it's going to make the kind of cartoon worlds of these paleo mega sequence landscapes that Tim Clary is fond of putting up at Answers Institute of just seem just childishly stupid. It's like trying to pass off the map of Samaria in the old Conan novels or Middle Earth in Tolkien as an accurate rendition of things. Although, to be fair, Tolkien's Middle Earth topography is more detailed than what you get with Andrew Snelling and Tim Clary and all the rest when it relates to what was going on in the pre-flood world. So it's just an absolute corker. And I strongly recommend absolutely everybody, if you are interested in geology, Nick Zentner, I will type his name in here. His videos, you'll find him online. His lectures and stuff, he routinely puts access to their main website at the college. So all these papers they're discussing are open access, so you can follow right along. It's absolutely magnificent stuff. And he's also just a rip snorter of a good educator. He's the geology teacher you would have loved to have had if you had geology at all, or a teacher that you would have loved to have had. His ability to explain things, the familiarity of stuff, the interactions that he has with people at so many different levels, it's absolutely exhilarating. And so the fact that we have educators like that knocking around in our present world is one of the little plus signs that we can have, even if we have a group of scientific illiterates operating at the federal level thanks to Trump 2.0. They're not really paying much attention to geology. I think about the only thing that might interest the Trump administration on geology is oil exploration, which, by the way, isn't really likely to do much because of the high price of competition and low consumption from people balking about buying oil. The last thing the major oil companies need is more oil resource, because that would theoretically lower the price and reduce their profits. And thanks to the Iranian war making things a mess, it spurred interest in electric cars, not only in Europe, but in the United States. I, by the way, needed to gas up my little hybrid. The last time I put gas in it was after coming back from Christmas last year. And then I stuck another couple gallons in, and that'll do me for another 100 miles or so. So admittedly, I don't do a colossal amount of driving locally, but nevertheless, it means that of the many prices that are going up at the grocery store and other places, the one thing I don't have to worry about is the price of gas, because my 45 mile per gallon hybrid means that I'm functionally insulated from all of that. So take that, the average gas guzzling suburban vehicle. So anyway, in fact, we had a group of progressive Democrats that are angling for the nomination to run against Baumgartner for our House seat here, who is just an enabler of Trump in the same way that his predecessor, Kathy McMorris Rodgers, was. And one of the things that I was pointing out in there as they were discussing a variety of issues in relation to ICE and economic policies and tariff issues and all that, but one thing that didn't come up in their discussion, so I made a point of bringing it to their attention in the little table meets and stuff at the end of the talk, was the idea that we should be moving towards a cogeneration electric grid. This is the thing that typically electric companies not fond of, but is being done in some areas in Europe and other places. And that is, if you have your own like solar facility on your roof that's generating power, and you at a particular day have surplus from what's coming in, you should be able to sell that back to the grid, back to the electric company. And then, of course, you need to have a battery storage network so that power can be stored or shunted from one part of the grid to the other, so that it makes our system stabler, and also means that you have a cogeneration system where there's also now an economic incentive for people to have their own grassroots system. I can easily see the technology reaching the stage where often people are charging their electric cars in their garage from the electricity they're generating on their roof, and then have stuff left over. Oh, great geology teacher at the University of Calgary. Fun, yes, to hang out. Often hung his Christmas tree from the roof of the chain upside down. Oh, yeah. Great teachers are always a tremendous inspiration. And I think most anybody that has a huge love of interest of knowledge that's been ongoing will have found there will have been one or more teachers that they've encountered over the years that kind of lit that fire in their brains and showed them what you can really do in that sort of a thing. And you have so many people that are doing that. Nick Zentner does that. Forrest Valkai does that sort of thing. Milo Rossi, Erica Gutsick-Gibbon. These are all people who are pursuing and are in academic careers and educational things. And when he's not being ballistic in his criticisms of creationists and woo, Dave Farina is an absolutely magnificent explainer of things in his material. And John Perry, there's another one in there. So there's just a whole slew of people increasingly on the internet. There are people in archaeology. Flint Dibble connects up with an awful lot of those people as well, that if you put your little tendrils out and create your network of reliable information people, and that you will be discovering that they are anxious to bring up the sources that they're drawing on, and for their viewers to follow up on those sources to learn in the same way that I try to do on my work. And that should be the responsibility of everybody doing videos in these areas, that you don't want to have anybody have to take your word for it. That if you have source material, first of all, if you didn't have source material, why are you claiming it? So if you have source data that you're drawing on, make an audience so that they can read it too and follow up on all of that stuff. Since so much of this material is available directly, and don't be relying on summary material, the sort of things you would find in secondary sources like newspapers or even magazines, Scientific American, things like that. It's not that they're inaccurate, but get people onto primary source material so that they can dive into the deep shit. And in any really ongoing, interesting geological area, for example, you need to be up to speed. And so by following people who are directly connecting up with the current college environment, when I hit college back in the ancient times in the 1970s, it was a shock to find out how much of a difference there was in the history that I had imbibed in very good history teachers at the high school level versus what was going on at the cutting edge of historiography at the college level. And that's, I'm sure, true for virtually every discipline. And it's only magnified as so much more information is available and journals are available and people can really dive into stuff with a vengeance. And because we've seen the dire political ramifications of too many of the electorate not following these sound principles and putting people into power who are antithetical to reason and progress, well, it matters. And anybody that's way younger than I am, you're going to be living in this world that's being made by us old farts. And you need to get on the ball, practice sound methods, make sure that to the extent possible that people who don't practice sound methods don't get elected to things at any level. They're too dangerous. They're screw ups. If we're going to be progressing, we've got to have sound reasoning at every level. And the sort of clownery that we've got going on at the federal level because of the Trump administration, all that Project 2025 folderol from the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation, we can't afford that as a culture. We can't get to Star Trek on the basis of such people. So anyway, that puts us up into our little landscape there. We've gone a little half an hour. Let me put our thank you note for our people who have stuck with the old art through thick and thin and thick. It seems to oscillate between thick and thin all the time these days, but that's what happens. And thanks, everybody, for colleagues, researchers, assistant researchers, friends, legacy patrons all over the years who have helped keep the little thing going from month to month. It makes a difference, and it is a great thumbs up to have a feeler that there's people like Ian Chan, who's all the way down in Australia, Paula Gia, and all these others who are aware of what we do and are keeping with us through thick and thin. Thank you for all of that. And I admit that everybody that's in these areas is often rattling the can. I'm in a slightly easier situation than quite a few people in this area where they're increasingly dependent because of changes in funding at government levels and others, where their livelihood, the ability to get grants and things are drying up. Whereas I, operating in my little enclave of Social Security, that it's a low amount of money that I have to play with, but it has a stability that kind of insulates me from some of the buffeting that would be going on if I were 30 years old trying to get a grant or a college position. So we all have our ups and downs on this little area. So anyway, on the Christmas final, he had us describe the Christmas turkey from a geologic standpoint. Ah, yes. Yeah, well, the turkeys are derived forms of ornithine birds, which means that if memory serves me, there's groups like ducks and a few others, and loons and that actually probably their lineages were already on the scene before the KT extinction. But I think the groups that the turkeys have developed out of are somewhat more recent. So if memory serves me, so they would be Cenozoic critters. But they would certainly be way older than Bishop Usher's 6,000-year Earth. And I'm assuming, as we look into things, that whatever group of birds, since for all practical purposes, Leitner's listing of I think 150 some odd bird kinds, which are basically the bird families, would be on the ark, stuck in there somewhere. They were very scrupulous in making sure all the bird families were on there, and therefore all the bird kinds are accounted for. But I'll take the evolutionary perspective on this rather than that. And of course, the aside that Benjamin Franklin wanted the turkey to be our national bird, but others regarded it as not imperial enough, and hence we end up with the bald eagle. So anyway, which there's some bald eagle nests in Spokane, up on some high poles out there along by the river. So we're doing our part to sustain the little critters from our end. So let us put up our advert for Rocks Were There Volume 2, of which we hope before the end of the year we will have out for everybody to marvel at and hopefully buy, given the fact that one without t'other is incomplete. And together, those will be a mass of technical and critical analysis that is not matched by any other book. Nobody has covered this much material, both from the technical literature that pulls stuff together from so many different disciplines, and the creationist literature, where we catalog at a fabulous level all of their errors and infightings and cliques that will allow you to navigate through all the mess, pretty much regarding any creationist you might encounter. Pin them down to where they're coming from on the landscape, and you'll be able to use our books to coalesce your response. So that's part of the selling point. Gravy layer, pockets of cranberries, and turkey stuffing, etc. Yes. By the way, my niece makes an absolutely spectacular cranberry sauce that's done fresh, always with. And I've been trying to get a little bit of horseradish into the mix that makes a little bit of a tang to it. She and I are probably the greatest lovers of the cranberry sauce, as opposed to although she still likes that old classic canned gel blob form that those of us who are old farts remember that from family things and all that. I was never terribly fond of that aspect of it. But fresh cranberries, where you have the actual cranberries and little lumps and stuff and all that texture and stuff in it, it's tangy stuff, and can work on a sandwich as you dismember the dinosaur turkey for meals afterwards. Many things to do. Anyway, that brings up to us a case on anything. Has anybody got any charming questions or stuff there, Vesta? If not, we are close to 40 minutes. I think that can cover for the material. Next week will be another happy-go-lucky Casey Luskin list thing. Spoiler alert, I'm not holding my breath that there's going to be any revolutions in this area. As we plow farther and farther back into what are functionally older and older and older technical sources, all we're doing is burrowing into the data field on the more recent material that already doesn't support their position. But it will be interesting to see what they plow into, whether or not other side topics comes up, because whenever we find some unusual little niche areas, it can lead off into some fascinating new research, which then we can cross-check to find out whether they've got it on their list or not. I'm just curious to find out total how much above 800 papers it actually is, and how it breaks down as to how much of it is recent material. They were starting off with just tons of stuff that are just like a couple years old, but now increasingly there's just gobs of things that are a decade or older and more. So it'll be an interesting mix to see how that all blends together as we go. So anyway, everybody stay super duper safe. If weather is icky, if ice is running around being a nuisance, if there's circumstances on, be wary about, taking out loans and all these other things, because the market is bumping along in a messy circumstance. And I still contend we're in 1929 waiting for the ships to crash. We still have an overinflated stock market that's way above correction level. We've got stress points that are self-inflicted from the tariffs and now the Iranian war. We've got deficits ballooning all over the place. There's going to be the point where the interest on the debt is becoming a big ticket item in the same way that it was saddling the first Bush administration back after the Reagan years ballooned the deficits. Although our deficits are so much bigger thanks to spendthrift Trump. And there he is trying to do his stupid ballroom at our expense. And he is paying off his various cronies at our expense and getting himself insulated from any tax return auditing at more our expense, and painting the stupid reflecting pool blue, and redecorating the White House to look like one of his sterile resorts. It's just pathetic. And all of that stuff's got to go. It's all going to be torn out. I would recommend that we send him the bill for it, or some of the oligarchs who have been underwriting some of this stuff, they could share in it. And I'm sure they'll try never to pay it. But if so, all the debris that we haul out, let's just dump it on his front yard, metaphorically speaking. I think that would be fitting, and just let him complain, and he can say, thanks to you and the Supreme Court, you can't stop me. The president would be able to say. So we'll find out what we go on, assuming we still have a republic at the end of the year. Trump is having his stupid little birthday party, of which apparently most all of the entertainers aren't showing up. There's still the idiot arch over things, which is it's looking like a mess there in front of the White House at the moment. And then, of course, we've got the problems of getting into the midterms to see what's going on there. So exciting times for us all. Anyway, we will find out whether we're still here next week. And everybody stay safe. Watch out for the laser-wielding penguins. And we will be checking you out for another episode next week. Endings a stream.